I know a physician, let's call him David, who retired after 34 years in emergency medicine. He had a plan: golf on Tuesdays, travel in the fall. Finally read the stack of books that have been on his nightstand since 2009. The 6 month in, David was lost. The rhythm of his life was gone. Mornings arrived without a reason to rise. The days stretched out empty. None of the new activities sparked anything in him. Silence had become his closest companion. Mary, his wife, finally called their son. "That is worrying me," she said. "He's withdrawn, wandering in a fog all day long. Nothing seems to excite him. He seems depressed, and I don't know how to help him." David wasn't sick. He wasn't depressed. Not yet. He was lost, and nobody, not his colleagues, not his family, not the hospital that threw him a retirement party and handed him a plaque, nobody had warned him that was coming. Welcome to Legacy Lens. I'm your host, Andy Eigner. I'm talking to you today because David's story is not unusual. It's nearly universal. And it does not have to end that way. It almost ended for Dr. David. This is Legacy Lens, episode 19. Who are you without the white coat? And if this for every physician who is 5 years from retirement, 50 days out, who are already wondering what happened to them. You're not broken. You're not done. You're in the most important transition of your life with no roadmap. That is what we are building today, a roadmap. How to avoid the identity trap. Let me ask you something. When someone at a party says, "Tell me about yourself," what comes out of your mouth first? Your specialty? Your hospital? How long you've been an MD in practice? Maybe a case that you are particularly proud of. If that's true for you, and I bet it is, that's not arrogance, that's evidence. Evidence that somewhere in the 30,000 hours of training and practice, the line between you and your role quietly disappeared. Medicine does this on purpose. It must. The system needs total commitment, so it rewards identity fusion at every turn. Every good morning, doctor, every moment a patient looks at you for help or guidance, every time you make a call at 2 a.m., it saves someone's life. For 30 years, the hospital has held up a mirror, and the reflection is crystal clear. Then you retire, and the mirror disappears. Sandra spent 28 years as the doctor everyone in a small town knew. She delivered their children, cared for their parents, and guided families through the hardest moments of their lives. Then she retired. A few weeks later, she went to the hospital for a routine test. And for the first time, she wasn't Dr. Sanders. She was just another patient in a gown, waiting to be called. No privileges, no voice, no identity. "It hit me," she said. "Without the right code, I was no one." What Sandra was experiencing has a name. Researchers call it the triad of loss. First, the loss of your professional identity, the role, structure, and daily confirmation that you matter. That loss cascades into the loss of purpose, the reason to engage, to show up, to drive somewhere at 6 a.m. And the loss of purpose slides into something darker, the loss of meaning. A quiet, relentless question: did any of this add up to something? Here's the thing about that question. It doesn't matter that you helped thousands of lives. It doesn't care about your board certifications or the hospital ring with your name on it. It arrives in the silence of a Tuesday morning with nowhere to be, and it waits. And here is what I need you to hear. You're not weak in feeling this. You're experiencing the predictable, almost inevitable consequences of giving 30 years of yourself to a system that never gave you a plan for what came after. The first step out of it is not a new hobby. It's not a consulting practice or a part-time gig. The first step is an honest look at who you are underneath the white coat and the tie. And that's harder than it sounds, because most of us have never had to look. Who were you before? Here's an exercise I give to physicians I work with. Sit down, no phone, no television, and answer one question in writing. Why did you choose medicine? Not the polished answer, not the version you gave your medical school admissions committee, the real one. For most physicians, something shifts about halfway through this exercise. They stop writing about competence and they start writing about a person. A grandmother whose suffering they couldn't stop. A doctor they shadowed at 15 who seemed like the most purposeful human being they'd ever seen. A moment in a waiting room or a hospital corridor or a biology class when something clicked. I want to be the one who knows what to do. But the truth is, not every path into medicine looks like that. It doesn't have to. Sometimes the truth is even simpler. One physician told me, very honestly, that he wanted to be a carpenter, but his father and brothers were all physicians. He realized that if he wanted the life he admired, the stability, the opportunity, the standard of living he grew up with, medicine was the only path that made sense. So he chose it, and he became a highly respected orthopedic surgeon. In a way, he did become a carpenter. He just applied those innate talents to bone instead of wood. Two other physicians told me a story that was even simpler. Best friends in college, they couldn't decide between engineering and medicine, so they drew straws. Medicine won. And today, both are extraordinary clinicians, thoughtful, compassionate, deeply committed to their patients. On the surface, these stories seem to contradict the heroic narrative we like to attach to medicine, but they don't. In fact, they reveal something essential. The method of choosing medicine is not the measure of the physician. The values they bring to their chosen professions are. Because underneath those unorthodox decisions were the same qualities that define the profession at its best. The willingness to serve, the desire for mastery, a sense of responsibility, a refusal to look away from suffering, a commitment to being useful in the world. Those values did not retire. They didn't fade. They didn't weaken with time. The ability to sit with suffering without flinching is one of the rarest capacities a human being can develop. The ability to translate terrifying information into something a frightened person can hold on to. The ability to be fully present with someone in the worst moment of their life. These are not clinical skills. They are human skills. And physicians spend 30 years sharpening them to an extraordinary edge. So yes, one doctor followed family expectations, two others drew straws, but all they became the kind of physicians patients remember with gratitude decades later. The path into medicine may differ. The values that sustain a life in medicine do not. James was a cardiologist for 32 years. When he retired, he was convinced he had nothing to offer outside of medicine. 6 months later, he was volunteering with a grief support program at his church. I walk in, he told me, and I just sit with people. I don't fix anything, I just stay. Families describe him as the most comforting presence they've ever known. He has no idea he's been training for that his entire career. The question is not, who am I now that medicine is over? The question is, who was I before medicine named me, and what have 30 years of practice made of that person? That person is your foundation, and they have been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. Taking honest inventory. Before you can design what's next, you need to know where you are, not where you want to be, not where you tell your spouse you are, where you are for real. At Legacy Lens, we built the Physician Readiness Scorecard for this stage of the transition. 35 questions across 7 dimensions: identity, purpose, emotional readiness, relationships, financial confidence, physical vitality, and legacy. It's not a wellness survey, it's a mirror. And what it reflects is almost always surprising. The financial dimension, physicians mostly nail that. Money is planned. What scores low consistently, almost universally, is identity, purpose, and relationships outside of medicine. A retired oncologist once said that at his first dinner party after retiring, he noticed nearly every story he reached for came from a patient. Not because he wasn't aware, but because his world hadn't been physicians, their spouses, and their work that bound them. Stepping outside it, he realized how little space he left for anything else. The scorecard doesn't judge that, it just names it. The naming is the beginning. Take it before you retire, not after. The insights it gives you are far more powerful when you still have time to act on them. Your legacy is already happening. I want to say something that might surprise you. Your legacy is not something you build after you retire. It's already happening. It happened every time a frightened patient left your office feeling less alone. It happened to the resident who treats patients with unusual gentleness, because that's how you treated them when they were exhausted and terrified interns. It happened in the family that was blessed with 10 more years together because of something you caught on a scan at 7 p.m. on a Friday when you could have gone home. Legacy is not a plaque you display in your bookcase. It is the living, breathing ripple of who you are and what you choose to do. So the question isn't, how do I build a legacy? The question is, now that you can see the one you've already built, how do you keep building and expanding it on your own terms in the time that's given to you? I know a retired trauma surgeon who teaches crisis communication to first-generation college students. A retired pediatrician now runs a food bank in his county. A retired internist finally finished a novel she started decades ago. They may have stepped away from clinical work, but they're still using every skill medicine taught them. Let's bring David back. After about 8 months of trying to find purpose in his new life, his son convinced him to speak with us. We worked through our scorecard together. We talked honestly about what he was grieving and what he was finally allowing himself to want. He wrote his legacy statement, 3 sentences about who he is and when he isn't a doctor. And then something shifted. David didn't go back to the ER. He didn't start volunteering. Instead, he began building a life that felt like his, not the continuation of his career, but an expansion of his identity. He pulled the old Porsche out of the garage and started restoring it. He and his wife finally took the trip to Portugal that postponed for decades. He's learning Portuguese. He wants to order his coffee properly and say bom dia like locals. He's writing a handbook for medical interns, the kind of practical, real-world guidance he wished he had. And once a month, he meets with a young physician who reminds him of himself at the beginning. No one of this looks like medicine. All of it carries meaning. He said something to me recently that stayed with me. I'm still making an impact. It just feels different now. That's the point. Impact doesn't disappear when the clinical chapter ends. It changes form. It moves into craftsmanship, curiosity, mentorship, travel, creativity, into the parts of life that were waiting patiently while medicine demanded everything. The values that shape their life in medicine: steadiness, compassion, presence, mastery, don't retire. They simply find a new place to live. That is what this transition can be, not a diminishment, a redirection. You spent 30 years becoming extraordinary at one thing. The years ahead are an invitation to pursue your purpose in a new way, on your terms and at your pace. In closing, if today stirred something in you, I want you to do one thing. Take the Physician Retirement Readiness Scorecard. You can find it at the link in the end of the show notes. It takes 15 minutes. It might change the next 15 years of your life. And remember, your career defined your title. Your legacy defines your life. I'm Andy Agnew. This is Legacy Lens. Thank you for being here.